Hi guys, it's me, Niners. Got a whole new setup going on. We've got lighting, we've got this voiceover going on, a lot of new stuff. Way better than recording on the phone. So, today we're going to be doing something a little bit fun. We're going to be applying this prosthetic. This one right here, I made it. It's available in my shop, making sure you guys can see it in the camera. This is the female vampire brow. It's a smaller prosthetic than the male brow, which is why there's a difference. It's sculpted on a female face versus the male face. So that's what we're going to be working with today. And I'm going to show you the steps from the beginning all the way to the very final look. And so let's go ahead and get started. So first things first, we're going to go ahead and keep our hands sanitized and clean. If you have some hand sanitizer, if you're able to wash your hands, go ahead and start with that. You don't want to have anything on your hands when you go to start working with prosthetics and adhesives and all that stuff. Especially if you're working with other people, you want to make sure that your hands, your station, everything's clean. So we're going to start with the adhesive. Camera focus. So this is Prozade. This one in particular is from Graftobian. You can go ahead and purchase it from any kind of special effects makeup site. I got this off of Amazon because I needed it quickly. So this one is what I'm using. This is a medical grade adhesive, so it is safe to apply to the skin. Always make sure you do a patch test first before just applying some kind of adhesive to your face, whether it is spirit gum, Prozade, latex. You want to make sure that you're not allergic to anything. I have no allergies to any of these products, so I'm just going right in. But if you're new to it, do that patch test first. So first thing before I apply any glue, I'm making sure the prosthetic fits my face. So we're going to go in, apply it, make sure all the corners are going to lay down nice. If there's anything that needs to be adjusted, any corners near the eyes that need to be cut, I'm going to go ahead and look into that. I'm seeing if it's going to mess with my piercings at all. Doesn't look like it's gonna. Making sure it's not going to go too far into the hairline. And now we're going to move into the glue. So I'm applying in the center of my forehead because that's going to be the structure of the prosthetic that's going to be glued down the best, because you want that to have the most hold. You don't want to completely cover yourself in this adhesive. You want to start in the center and slowly work your way out, just in case you need to do any adjustments or if things need to be tight across the face. You're able to do that versus just slapping the thing on and then having to try to wiggle with glue already on, and it becomes a mess. So I'm starting with glue in the middle of the prosthetic, in the middle of my forehead, and I'm going to let both of those dry. So you want to make sure with this Prozade adhesive or with latex, whichever you're using, that it's clear when it dries. Otherwise, it's not going to be as tacky. You're going to risk the prosthetic falling off. It's just going to be a mess. So always make sure the layers are clear in between. Now we're going in and I'm applying only in the middle where I applied the glue. I want to make sure that it's going to look a little bit silly, but this is to make sure that the placement is good. Nothing's going to be too crooked. You're able to make adjustments as you go versus the stress of going all in at once. So at this point, I am going in with the Q-tip and I am getting those edges in between the skin and the latex. So you want to get that under piece and the skin at the same time with the Q-tip, but you're not laying them down. You're just getting them saturated with the glue. At this point, I'm working from that center point on the forehead to the parts that I know the prosthetic is going to lay down. So again, working from the center all the way out. These are the spots that I can see the prosthetic is going to lay down flat. I'm also hitting the inside of the prosthetic as I go to make sure both my skin and the prosthetic are getting a layer of glue. I'm waiting for things to dry. It's going to look real pretty. You're going to have this thing just kind of flopping around, but be patient. Trust the process. So now that it's dry, I'm going ahead and I'm laying the prosthetic down, working from the center out to the edges, making sure everything's flat, there's no random air bubbles, everything looks good. And now I'm working off to the cheekbones. So a thing with prosthetics that you want to pay attention to is if it's not a foam latex piece that is totally flat on the inside, if it's like this regular latex where there's hollow points, You want to pay attention to raised areas in the prosthetic, especially if it's not secured with some kind of cotton or thicker latex in that area. You want to make sure not to put Pros-Aid in those areas, like the cheekbones, because you don't want to glue down something that's supposed to be raised. And if you do that, you're going to have a weird dent in like the cheekbone area. It's going to look awkward and it's not going to look right. And because there's already glue on there, it's going to be difficult to fix after you already apply that. So try to avoid any raised areas like the brow on this or the cheekbones, any sort of ridges where there's a hollow point. Don't put glue in those areas because that's going to mess up the look and it's going to look really wonky and it's just going to kind of kill the whole vibe. So at this point, I'm making sure now that I'm getting the final edges of the prosthetic with the Q-tip right underneath. It's mostly attached except for those little edges, so I'm going under and again coating both my skin in that area and the prosthetic, making sure that they've got some glue in between so they can get tacky and I can lay them down flat. Another little thing about Pros-Aid adhesive in particular is that it is safe to get into your hair. So you notice how I'm going right on top of where my brow hairs are? That's fine. Pros-Aid adhesive will come out of the hair, especially when you use IPM remover or any kind of warm sort of breakdown alcohol. It will come out of your hair. Latex will not, so definitely be careful when you're applying. You were to put latex over that, it would rip the hairs out and you would not be having a good time. So definitely pay attention to things like that. Now that everything has kind of dried up a bit, I'm going over the very top. So now that everything is tacky, I'm going over and I'm pressing all of those edges down into my skin so that they're going to lay flat. And this top layer of Pros-Aid is going to sort of start that final seal. And I'm just going to work my way in a complete circle all around the whole prosthetic, pushing down all of those edges, making sure everything's flat. So this is how it looks once everything is kind of sealed down with that Pros-Aid. At this point, I'm going over a second time with the Pros-Aid, just making sure all of those edges that I had previously covered, now that they are covered in that glue, I push them down a second time so that they can definitely lay flat as I go over it again. Now this next part isn't necessary exactly, depending on what you're doing. I have been taught to totally seal things down. My mentor, she made sure that I knew if I'm putting down a prosthetic, that is going to be glued to the face and it's not going anywhere. Even if you have an actor or a model that perspirates a lot underneath, that thing's not moving. So what I'm going to do now is with my leftover Pros-Aid, I'm putting some latex inside and kind of mixing it together to kind of make this latex Pros-Aid mix. It's going to be mostly latex with a little bit of the leftover Pros-Aid, making sure that's all mixed together. And I'm just going to go ahead and use this to totally seal it down. Now this is a thicker latex, so it's going to be more of a paste at this point. Kind of seal up those edges a little bit more than what the Pros-Aid would do. Remember how I said it was part Pros-Aid, part latex? It's still latex, so do not by any means get it in like your eyebrow or your hairline. Just don't do it. It's going to dry and rip out hair. Just don't. So what you're going to do is when you apply this time, you're going to be careful of where the hair is. So I'm only applying this in the areas that aren't connected to my hairline. So right at the top of my ridiculous widow's peak, right there on the side, I'm not going to apply any of that latex. Those are areas that have already been sealed down with Pros-Aid, so they don't need that extra right there. I'm going to get as close as I can, though, near the cheekbones, making sure I'm going to seal all of that down and make sure it's locked in. Getting up towards the eyebrow, working down the cheekbone. The thing is, unless you're like me and you have little angry shaved goth brows, you definitely want to be careful when you go up higher on that eyebrow arch. For anyone who does have their full eyebrow hair going on, what you can do is either avoid the area entirely if it's not covered by the prosthetic already, or you can glue it down with like the glue sticks you find at the craft store, like the washable non-toxic stuff. You can glue those down, set them with powder, and then go over with the adhesive. That way there's some sort of barrier. Going back in and we're setting down those layers again like we did with the Pros-Aid. We're repeating the process again with the latex. I want to make sure There's nothing crazy sticking up, even if there's not totally perfect edges on this prosthetic. I want to make sure that I try to get them as best as I can, little detailed spots. So this is how it looks. Everything's laid down flat, nothing crazy sticking up. So at this point, now that the glue has dried, we're going to be taking some kind of powder. I'm using baby powder. You can use translucent powder and some kind of brush, something fluffy. Maybe not that one, it's got latex on it. This one was given to me by my mentor. It's got a little twist cap and it pops out. It's adorable. I love it. I keep it in my kit. I love this thing. So I'm going to go in and powder all of those edges that had adhesive so everything's not still tacky. Okay, so you see the difference here between the skin tone and the prosthetic. That isn't really going to work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this bruise wheel and I'm going to be using the yellow and the red colors to make some kind of orange, something darker that's a little bit closer to my skin tone that's going to look nice and even when I go to apply my base color. So now that I've mixed it together, both of those colors on my little flat little plate here, I'm going to go ahead and apply with a brush. You can use a sponge, you can use a paintbrush. I just happen to have a paintbrush in front of me, so that's what we're using. And I'm going straight in, just kind of stippling it on. It's gonna look a little crazy. It's not gonna be totally like perfect when you go to apply. The prosthetic has texture to it, so it's gonna pick up all of that. You want to make sure you just kind of get a general coating over the prosthetic so that there isn't any crazy stark contrast in the colors. I'm kind of okay with this uneven sort of splotchy sort of look going on because I know that when I do put the color on top of this, it's going to start to show all of those little differences and it's just going to look like broken up skin tone versus some solid piece on my face. So now that I'm kind of looking like Freddy Krueger over here, I can go in and start working with my airbrush color. It's going to look a little crazy, you're going to feel a little weird, but just trust the process. Trust it. So right now I'm going to go ahead and start pre-prepping my paints. I go ahead and shake them up. These particular colors are airbrush makeup from Pro Air. They are hybrid, which means they are part alcohol, part water. Along with your colors, you want to make sure you have an alcohol bottle in between, something with just pure alcohol in it, especially with these paints, because you don't want all of those colors to be building up in your gun as you're interchanging them. So having an alcohol bottle to kind of clean out your gun in between colors is always good to have. So see, immediately I noticed that there's nothing coming out when I go to pull the trigger back. So I'm taking out the needle and that's where I start to troubleshoot and figure out where the problem is. There is some leftover paint on the needle, so I'm going to clean that off and run it through again. At this point, it's important to know your tools, so you want to be able to know your airbrush gun in this particular scenario to be able to troubleshoot. Is the problem with the gun? Is the problem with the compressor? Is the problem with the paint bottle? That way you're not sitting there trying to figure out one thing when it's a totally different problem. So definitely learn your tools, learn how to take apart your gun and put it back together, know when to distinguish if the problem is with the paint bottle versus the gun. So there. Now that it's working, we got an even stream going through. And we're going to start to go in with this light beige color. This one is called Pale Dead. And so now I'm going to start applying to start covering all of that orange patchy work that we just put down and make sure everything's a solid color when we go with this base. When you're applying, you don't want to go full force with the airbrush gun and pulling that trigger all the way back. You want to just do light little circles sort of around to kind of make sure everything's even. You don't want to totally blast your face with this thing. I've painted my own face for years now, so I'm quite used to it, but if you're not used to painting yourself with the airbrush, always make sure you keep an eye on the pressure that you're keeping things at. I paint my face at 40 psi. This is a comfortable range for me. Before anything higher than that, you're going to start to feel like sandpaper on the skin. It's going to be painful, so don't do that, especially if you're painting other people. Pay attention to your psi. And just kind of work in layers. You don't want to do too crazy, especially if you don't, because once it's on there, you can't take it back off. So just kind of work in little circles, kind of work your way through it. and be patient. Now right here, I'm holding my breath as I go over the under part of my nose and the top of my lip because I don't want to be inhaling the paint. So normally I count to 3 in my head, I take in a deep breath, and I exhale as I start to paint. That way it is forcing the paint out of my nose versus breathing it in. Now I'm taking the paint down my neck so that it just kind of transfers down. It doesn't have any harsh cutoffs, especially for these photos that I'm going to be taking. It definitely helps when you don't have any, if you're doing a creature makeup, you don't want any human like features showing. Like if I'm a vampire, I don't want my normal tan skin showing underneath. So I'm going to take it down into underneath where my shirt's going to be showing just to make sure the look is overall cohesive. So there, now that we're all based out, it's looking a little crazy. Kind of getting any creases from when I had my eyes closed. And yeah, we are based out, looking a little ghostly. Cleaning out the gun in between colors, making sure nothing's clogged up with that alcohol. So now we're going in with this sort of muted grayish color. It's called Dirt. Sort of a cool tone, grayish brown. I don't want anything too warm going on. And I'm just going to go in and start to shade in everything. I'm going to try to go in light and go darker as I go. Because again, once it's on there, you can't really take it off. So you want to start light and work up the intensity in layers. I'm accentuating the widow's peak. Everything with this prosthetic and this look is going to be very angular, so you want to match that with your colors. Now I'm going into the cheekbones and doing a little bit of contour, making sure things are kind of sharp. So you got to match what's going on the forehead. I'm also matching it into the cheekbone area. I'm also going in and shading my underjaw. I'm also kind of going in and darkening the lips, something a little more of that bitten look, kind of undead, nothing too defined. Accentuating the furrowed brow and the inner corners. Now at this point I'm going in and doing some accent lines on the cheekbones, something to just kind of make it look a little more aggressive, a little more detailed. So at this point I'm kind of going in, I'm using a dark burgundy color in Scab to kind of deepen the eyeshadow that I got going on. I'm now going to switch over to Blood Red, going underneath the eye, sort of fading it downwards to kind of give that hint of blood, kind of in the face, going a little bit around the lips. And now I'm going to be doing sort of some vein work, really close to the under eye, kind of spidering up into the cheekbone and the brow area. At this point, it's going to be very careful detail around the eye because it's so close. You definitely don't want to be pulling back on that trigger, letting full paint out. You want it to be very light, very faint, and build it up again in layers. Another tip is that if you're not comfortable being this close to sensitive areas like the eye and or the nose or the lip, if you're doing fine detail like that, lower your pressure down to maybe 25 or 10 even. Now at this point, we're continuing with the sort of broken blood vessels underneath, kind of squiggling them out. There's no perfect way to do this. Try to keep things in sort of a honeycomb kind of texture. The shakier your hands are at this point, the better, because it'll look more organic versus having full-on, perfectly drawn squiggles. You don't want those. You want it to be heavier in some areas and lighter in others. You want it to be jagged. You want it to taper out. Just looks more organic as you go. Now that I'm happy, I'm going back in with Scab and I'm going to kind of deepen everything. So it's not that harsh dark to bright red. I'm going to kind of blend it out a little. And I'm just going to work my way down around the whole eye. So at this point, I'm kind of deepening any of the contoured areas, kind of tying in that Scab color with the dirt to kind of deepen it. Now I'm going to chisel it and deepen out that underjaw, bring it down into the neck. What I like to do is I like to take right where the tendons are and go in on each side and kind of taper it down towards your collarbone where it meets in the middle. It's going to be that sort of triangular shape. It just makes the look of all that aggressive features you've got in the forehead, you bring it down into the neck, and it just kind of makes everything more of that amplified sort of aggressive look. You want things to look hollowed out. It makes it a little more intimidating, especially with scary creature looks. You want things that kind of just flow from the neck up into the face. It keeps that angular sort of movement going on, and it kind of blends everything in nicely. I'm just going to go ahead and deepen up the lips. And this is what everything looks like so far. Now at this point, we're going to go in with that blood red, and we're going to start to have a little fun. Since it's a vampire, I want that sort of I just ripped somebody's throat out kind of look. So we're going in very close, and when you pull back the trigger more, it does, again, that watery sort of water paint effect. So I'm going to work backwards from the bottom up to kind of give it that dripping blood sort of look. And take it down the neck. It doesn't have to be perfect because liquid isn't a perfect line when it falls down like that. It's going to be messy. It's going to be thicker in areas and thinner in others. It's going to kind of connect all into one singular point when it drips down. So just kind of have fun with it at that point. Add little pieces to where there's bits that trailed off, bits that connected together. And now I'm going in with this little dotting technique. I'm just kind of quickly hitting the trigger and bringing it really close to kind of make it look like blood splatter. This is a good technique to kind of do if you don't have something to kind of stipple in those little droplets of blood. Now I'm taking this stipple sponge. If you can see it, it's a little bit tough. It's got a sort of an abrasive kind of texture to it. This is going to be great if you're going to stipple in any kind of blood or liquid to make it look like it's got that splattering technique without actually splattering. I'm also going in with this fake blood from Mayron. It's a thicker, coagulated, sort of dried blood. It's not like that Spirit Halloween stuff that dries super bright red and separates super quickly. This stuff dries down and doesn't really stay tacky afterwards, so it just sits better when you're doing it on makeups. It keeps that shine when you apply it. It just works way better than any of that thin stuff that you can get at like the Halloween store. And I'm gonna go in and just sort of stipple it on the face, and because it's got that nice texture, it's not gonna be totally perfect. There's gonna be small spots and big spots full of blood. At this point, you want to be careful because sometimes adding too much blood can totally ruin a look, so at some point it's best to know when to stop. Less can be more in certain situations. Now I'm gonna go in with this little brush and sort of paint on the blood where I had painted on with the airbrush makeup, just to make sure that shine is also on the dripping parts and not just on the splatters. Okay, so at this point you can see the under eye. It's got some space where you can't see any of the makeup, and we don't like that, so we're going to take this bruise wheel again. I'm going in with the burgundy color, and I'm just kind of dabbing it on. I don't want to go too crazy because this is cream paint, so it can be a little heavy, so you want to be light with your application and be careful blending in where the airbrush paint stopped and where the bare skin is showing. If you're working in the haunt industry or any kind of haunted house, this is a step you definitely don't want to forget when you're airbrushing your actors, because they tend to close their eyes sometimes a little too hard when you're doing the makeup, and when they go to open you see blank spots. It's like reverse panda eyes going on. So this little detail is a good little finishing touch to kind of make sure that it doesn't kill the illusion when you see spots of airbrush paint where it didn't hit. I'm going back in over the lips because the blood did seem to take away some of the color that I had put down. And now we're going to be going in with the black to kind of get the upper eyelid area right along the waterline. And I'm also rubbing my eyelashes with it to kind of coat them. I'm not going to go as far as to put mascara on. You can, but for the photos that I need, I don't need to go that far with it. You do want to get the eyelashes though, because when you go in with any kind of light airbrush color, it is going to coat every hair on the face or the area that you're painting. So my lashes were lighter than what they needed to be. So it's good to kind of go over them again with something dark so you don't have random white eyelashes going on. I'm also going in under the eye to kind of give it that lined, smoky kind of effect to it, just kind of blending everything down so there's no harsh kind of discoloration going on. Also going back in the center of the lip to kind of bring that darkness back in. We're also taking some of the alcohol and a Q-tip. This is a little detail. You don't have to go in with this, but I have a lot of jewelry on my face and it's got a lot of paint on it. And it looks kind of funny when it's all covered. So I'm just going to go in and remove very select spots on top of the jewelry that are coated in paint. Just going to make sure the jewelry shines through. Alright, and now that you've kind of added final details, this is kind of what everything looks like. I have toned down the lighting a bit so we can capture all of the detail going on in the paint. This is the female vampire brow that I have available in my shop. So yeah, this is something that you can do with this kind of prosthetic, and I hope you guys enjoyed it.